Welcome to the Sage Thought Leadership Podcast, building experiences that connect, remove friction, and deliver insights. Well, hi everyone, and welcome to our podcast. I'm Ed Kless, and with me here live at AI CPA Engage 2022 is Brian Tankersley from K2 Enterprises. Brian, welcome to the Sage Advice Podcast.
Thanks, Ed. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm so glad, oh my God, I'm so glad to see people again.
I said to you when we just met, I'm so glad to be three-dimensional again.
I know. I'm so afraid that my neighbors are going to think I'm mentally ill talking to my computer all day in my office every day, you know? So I'm so glad to be out and around people again.
You know, it's interesting. I've been remote for 18 years, so I was sort of used to it, but I also got on the road often. But now it was 2 years of not being, so I'm glad to be out here again. But you have some exciting news. You have a relatively new podcast for CPA Practice Advisor.
Well, we've been doing it for about a year and a half, 2 years. It's called The Tech Lab. Randy Johnston and I banter back and forth and talk about all the products serving the accounting firm space. So we go through and try to talk about all kinds, all things going on. We talk about some of the stuff going on with privacy. We also talk a lot about what's happening in the industry. There's been a huge change in the industry where there's a lot of the independents have been acquired by private equity. And so that's going to change a lot of how the industry works from a vendor perspective. So we talk about that.
Talk about that kind of thing. So it's almost really the apps, but also the business behind the apps as well.
Well, we do the business behind the apps. We try to talk about how the vendor affects you. And so what we try to do is we try to talk about what's coming. We go to CES. So every year we go to CES. So we see what's happening from a hardware software perspective. But then we also meet with the vendors to understand what they're coming out with and the why behind it, so that we don't miss something. Okay, so we're really trying to help firms pick the right applications and help them solve problems like how to get this one to talk to that one and other things like that.
What have you seen changed about that why? I'm curious about that because there's a lot of talk lately about the notion of purpose in an organization. And what have you seen change lately with regard to that why that companies, especially from a technology perspective?
You're saying the why from the vendors?
Yeah, from the vendors.
I think they're trying to cloudify everything they can, whether or not it makes sense to cloudify it. I'm convinced we'd have cloud-based buggy whips if somebody had a way to do it, but I think they're realistically trying to figure out how to automate a lot of their processes and how to integrate a lot of the tools together. And some have figured out and some haven't. But the real challenge is that the puck that they should be skating toward of what the practicing CPA does for work is changing so much that it's very difficult for those that haven't been involved with the profession for a long time to skate to where, to quote Wayne Gretzky, to skate to where the puck's going.
Yeah. Doug Sleater, I think, called what you're talking about the notion of digital plumbing. Right.
Doug stole that term from me.
Doug stole that term from me.
Yes.
Well, even better.
Yes.
Even better. So I'm talking to the originator of digital plumbing. So that's still a concept, right? This notion that we have to have all of the flow of not water, but information in the company.
Yeah, I'm actually doing a session here with Wesley Hartman, that's with a mid-sized firm in Southern Cal, on robotic process automation, because that's the answer for a lot of these things. But the problem is that we've got a lot of people trying to practice 21st century public accounting in software that was designed, during the Reagan administration. And so it's, in many cases, the product is morphed, and now they're, many times for the first time, they're rethinking this whole process from the vendor side. And the firms now are rethinking their process from the firm side. I was writing something earlier today. It strikes me how that I was talking to this guy I'm presenting with actually tomorrow, and he said, the clients don't want to come to the office anymore. And so he's at this mid-sized firm that's got 50, 75 people, and he said Friday there were 6 people in the office. So the world is changing. I'm hearing about firms where their staff people are getting recruited by big firms out of big cities, and they work remote in Dothan, Alabama, and cities like that.
Yeah.
So it's The world definitely has not sat still in the COVID era, even though a lot of us did sit still, like you and I didn't get on airplanes for a long time.
No, but it's interesting because one of the best definitions that I've heard of a knowledge worker is that if you're a non-knowledge worker, you have to bring your coffee to the office. But if you're a knowledge worker, you can bring your office to the coffee. And in a sense, accountants denied that reality for a long, long time, that their people could really just bring their office to the coffee. But it was this whole notion of, well, how do I know if they're working? Well, how do you know if they're working in the office?
Yeah, well, you need to rethink your role as a manager if you don't know how your staff's working and you're... this is going. But,
what I heard is a great phrase: manage the work, not the people.
Mm-hmm.
Manage the work. The work needs to get done. Is the work getting done? If so, leave them alone.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's interesting though. The challenge I'm seeing now is how you're going to do culture. Because in this era, having a team building event. People got to get on planes in a lot of firms now, and they've never met each other, so it's we're in uncharted waters right now, but it's good. That means it's good times for us. I
do think that's true. Because it really is about how is innovation and creativity going to play itself out in the accounting profession, which in some senses is overdue for it.
That's right. I mean, the firms that were doing holler and tick 30 to 40 years ago have to continuously improve and adapt at a level that most existing organizations don't improve, just because they're changing things up. It's a very interesting time right now.
So, question out of left field, and if this doesn't work, we can always cut it out because it's a podcast. It's a beautiful thing. 4 years ago, when you and I would get together, one of the big things was blockchain, and in Bitcoin as being the best implementation of blockchain at the time. One of the things that I heard from especially the blockchain advocates is you'll know blockchain has arrived when we're not talking about blockchain anymore. And I've heard that we're not talking much about blockchain anymore. Is it arrived, or has it gone sideways on us?
I think it has arrived. My initial analogy to blockchain was that accountants need to know about it the same way they need to know about SQL databases. They need to know they exist. They need to know conceptually what they do. Store data in a tamper-proof method, and they need to understand where it works and where it doesn't work. But Gary Boomer one time said, you don't have to know how to build a watch to know how to tell time, and that's the level at which we've got to know it. But I think it has changed a lot of things, but I think the things that are going to get changed are going to get changed at the enterprise first. So that the cross-border settlement things, the J.P. Morgan owes Citibank this much money and they've got to settle every day. That kind of stuff's going to get fixed first because that's where the most savings are. But they will eventually make their way down. But I think most of the blockchain stuff's going to be behind the scenes for most of your listeners and most of our folks that are professional.
Yeah, sort of like the way I equate it to this is there was a time when I was doing technology consulting where it was important for me to know what the TCP/IP address was of my computer or of other computers. Now, no, I don't know, and I don't care.
In IPv6, I don't know that my 50-year-old memory can handle that anymore. I don't have enough bits in my brain to hold an IPv6 address anymore.
Right. Well, we have an exit question, Brian, that we ask all of our guests, and that is, who is a hero of yours, and why are they a hero?
Who's a hero of mine, and why are they a hero? I'm going to pick this out of left field.
Those are the best kind.
Alan Turing. Because Alan Turing changed the face of World War II by reverse engineering the crypto that went behind the Third Reich, and basically is one of the reasons why we don't
speak German,
and he did this. It's funny. He did this in spite of being a persecuted group, and just went on and did his life anyway. And he was persecuted later for it, but he maintained his integrity and kept going in spite of it.
Lastly, Brian, how can somebody get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of me. I'm at BFT CPA on all social media. You can also reach me, Brian at K2E.com. Ed, thank you so much for the opportunity to spend time with you.
Brian, I was going to say thank you for being a guest on the Sage Thought Leadership Podcast. Review and subscribe by searching your podcast player of choice for Sage Thought Leadership Podcast.